Hey everyone, welcome back. This is going to be the second part of our snake game tutorial. In the first part, we ended with making the basic functionality of the snake game. We ended up making this project where you could move the snake up, down, left, and right using your arrow keys of the keyboard. And when the snake collided with the food moved to a random position and the score of the game increased, right? So this is where we ended our first part, and now we are going to start with the second part of our video, second part of our game. Okay, and by the end of this video we will be completing the entire snake game. So this is the final project link, this is the final games link, and the way the game works is when you click on the green play button, this game starts and you can move the snake up, down, left, and right using the arrow keys. And as you can see, when the snake eats more and more food, there is a tail behind the snake that keeps on increasing in length, right? The score is increasing, the tail's length is increasing, and the tail is following the snake. Along with that, if you make the snake hit its own tail, then the game gets over. See, I hit the tail of the snake and the game is over. So we are going to be adding the game over functionality for when snake hits the tail, and we are going to add the functionality to increase the tail length. Okay, so let's start with this video now. So the final games link is going to be in the description of the video. All right, and if you have not watched the part 1, I would recommend you guys watch the part 1. Part 1's link is also going to be there in the description of the video, so you guys will be able to build at least the very basic functionality of the snake game. And we are going to start from here. So basically, where we ended the part 1 of our project, the project that you guys published for part 1, you guys can continue coding from part 1. Or if you have not coded for part 1, then I'm going to be posting the template, the final output of part 1 project as the template link for this video. Okay, so I'm going to be pasting the link of this project as well, so you guys can follow this video by opening up this template link and coding from this point onwards. So this project already has the code of moving the snake up, down, left, and right, and when snake collides with food, the food moves to a random position and its score increases. Okay, so let's start coding from here. All right, so let me first full screen my window here, and now let's start. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to increase the tail length of the snake as the snake eats more and more food. Okay, so how do we do that? It's a simple action. So let's go to our design tab first of all. Okay, and what we are going to do here is we are going to add the very first tail object of my snake. Okay, so what I'm going to do is there is a snake object here, right? You click on the 3 dots here and clone this. Okay, so you see when I clone this, another snake 2 box is added in the same position as my snake object. I'm going to just rename this to, I'm going to call this tail 1. Okay, tail underscore 1, or tail 1, just like this as well, tail underscore 1. Let me call it tail underscore 1. So this is going to be my very first tail object in the game. Okay, so I just needed this in the game, and now I'm going to go to the code window. So let's understand what we are going to be doing. Okay, let me open up a whiteboard first of all, and I will be able to show you guys the logic of how we are going to be adding more tails and how is that tail going to be following the snake. So I'm just opening up my whiteboard here, and let's start with an empty whiteboard. Okay, cool. So what do we have? We have a snake object in our game, right? A snake box, and we have a food box. We have a red colored food box, right? So what we are doing is we are making the snake move up, down, left, or right using the arrow keys of the keyboard. It can move up, down, left, or right. Yeah. So now anytime the snake eats the food, what we are going to do is we are going to add a tail box, right? We are going to keep on adding a tail box behind it. And then as the snake moves, as the first box, it moves to a new position, the first tail box will move to the snake head's original position, right? And this second box will move to the first box's position. And the third box will move to the second box position, and so on. Yep, that's what is going to happen. So anytime you're moving your snake, this head box, the very first box, will move to a new position, and then the first tail box will move to the head's position. The second tail box will move to the first tail box position, and then and so on. So as many tail boxes there are, they will keep on move to make the tail follow the snake. This is what we're going to be doing. We are going to just swap the position. We are going to move the head box the way we are doing right now to a new position, but all we need to do is we need to keep on saving the original position of these boxes, right? So what we will be doing is we will be creating a variable to store the previous position, previous X and previous Y position of the snake box. Okay, then so before moving snake to a new box, we will store the original position in these two variables, px and py. Px will store the X position and py will store the Y position. Okay, and then what we will be doing is we are going to create two more variables called next X and next Y, nx and ny. Okay, so now when we have to move the snake box to the original head box position, that is px and py, but before moving the tail to the head's position, we will store the X and Y position of the tail in nx and ny. Okay, and then provide these values. Whatever these values are, we are going to set the px and py as the new X and Y position of the tail object, right? And we'll keep on doing the same for all of the other tail objects. Okay, it's a very simple cycle thing. Okay, think of it this way. Let me not overcomplicate it. Let's have three boxes here. Okay, so what we will be doing is for each of these boxes, for let's say all of these are tail objects, right? So we are going to first of all store the value of this box in nx and ny, or next X and next Y. Okay, store its current position, whatever its current position is there, in the nx and ny variables. And then we will be having a px and py variable that will be storing that will be having the position of the previous box, right? So whatever this value is, that will be the new position of my box here. Okay, and then we just give the nx and ny value to px and py, so that we can then do the same cycle for the second box. So second box is then, once you have done the activity for the first box, we can go to the second box, and second box's position will again be stored in nx and ny. Then second box will get its new position from the variables px and py, and then nx and ny can give its value to px and py, so that nx and ny can store this next box's position. Okay, you'll see this more clearly when we start coding. So first of all, let's do something. Let's do something different. Let's create, when you click on a variable, let's create a variable called tails. So this will be storing the length of the tail of the snake. Okay, so tails, and we are going to set the tails variable to a list. We are going to create an array of the tail. So it's going to be multiple tail objects, right? So it's going to be a list of tail objects. There are going to be multiple tail boxes. So this is what is going to be stored here. Now remember, I went to the design tab to create tail1 box, right? So this is going to be my first tail object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the list and maps category here. See on the top, in the top left, list and maps. And I'm going to create a list. So there is this create a list with and 3 empty boxes, right? Click on the settings option here and we just have one item in the list. Okay. So when the game starts, we are only going to have this tail1 object in my tail list. So click on tail1, drag out this tail1 block and place it inside create list with option and attach this create list with block here. So at the beginning of my game, this tails array, tails list contains only one tail1 object, only one object, only one tail object, and its name is tail1. Okay. What we will be doing is, anytime snake collides with the food object, we are going to clone this tail1 object and add it in the list again and again. So when snake collides with food, then you see here on the top left category, there is an objects option. Objects, click on objects, and here you will see there is a block called clone. Clone something and give it a name. So we are going to drag this block outside. Okay, clone, and then place this clone block at the bottom of when snake collides with food. So when snake collides with food, set the food tails. Okay, sorry. So set the food's x and y position to random numbers, right? So sorry, I think I messed up my code here. So set the food's x position to a random number between -6 and 6. Set the food's y position to a random number between 6 and -6, right? Then change score by 1, change scoreboard text to the score value, and then clone the tail1 object. So click on tail1, clone the tail1 object and name it. Give it a name. So we're calling it shape for now. Name it shape. Okay, or let's name it something else. Let's name it new tail. Okay, so let's name it new tail. So clone the tail1 object and let's name it new tail. And what we are going to do is we are going to put this new tail body in the list of my tails array, this tails list. Okay, so go to your list and maps section, and here you will see that there is an update list value block, insert at end block. Let's drag this block out and place it here. So what we are going to do is, in list, which list? In the tails list, we are going to add this new tail object. So in list tails, insert at end. So it will create a new empty space here on its own and add a new tail object here. Okay. So in the list, in the list tails, insert at end the new tail object. So go to your objects category here again and drag out the new tail object, new tail block, and place it here. Okay. So clone tail1 and name it new tail, and in list tails, insert at end the new tail object that we just created. So keep on increasing the length of this new tail, this tails list. Okay, every time the snake eats the food, this list of tail will keep on increasing. Okay, so that's happening here. So now let's move the tail objects. So move all of the objects that are going to be in this tails list. That tails need to follow the body of the snake, the head of the snake. This is the head of the snake that we have, right? So the tail has to follow the head of the snake. So we have to code that functionality now. So for that, as discussed, as I showed you, we are going to create 4 variables, one px and py to store the previous x and y values, and one nx and ny, next x and next y, to give the next value to the next x and y values to the tail object, right? So let's go to our variables and let's create variable px. Let's create the variable py, Let's create the variable nx. You can call these variables whatever you want. Okay, I'm giving it the names px, py, nx, and y so that it's easier for me to know which variables I'm using. Okay, so now we have our 4 new variables created: nx, ny, px, py. So what do we need to do? First of all, in this when green play button is clicked, see, we are changing the snake's x position by x speed and changing the snake's y position by y speed. What we need to do is, the snake is basically the head object, right? So before moving the snake to the new position by changing its x and y, we need to store its previous position. So whatever its position was before moving to the new position. So what we need to do is, we need to store this x or its previous x and y position in the px and py variables. Okay, so go to your variables section and drag out the set variable block and attach it just above change snake x. Okay, select px value here, px variable. So set variable px to, and what will this be? It will be the snake's x position, right? So snake, click on the snake object here and scroll down and see, we store, there is a snake's position x. Okay, drag out this block and place it here. So set the variable px to the x position of the snake, and then duplicate this again. Set variable py to the y position of the snake. So px and py are storing the original x and y position of the snake, and then we are moving the snake using the change snake x and change snake y block. Okay, so we did this, we are doing this here. So before moving the head of the snake, so all of these are tail objects that I was showing you here, but we have the head object. Before moving the head object to a new position, what we are doing is, we are saying store the value of its current position in the px and py variables. Okay, and then move it to the new position using the change x and change y block. Okay, now once that is done, then now we can move the tail object. So how do we move the tail object? We are going to, so remember here in the whiteboard I showed you, we are going to do something for all the tail objects. We are going to give the tail object's original position in the to the nx and ny variables, and set the x and y position of the tail to the px and py values, right? To the px and py values, because px and py was storing this value, this position value. Okay, so what we're going to do is, we are going to add a loop that is going to go through all the elements of the tail list. Okay, so let's go to our loops, let's go to our code here, and here I'm going to go to my loops and timers block, loops and timers category. Click on loops and timers, and this time we are going to use a new loop block called for each element in the list. So the benefit of using this block is, this block can go through all the elements of a list and perform a set of activities on all the elements just like we need. Okay, so we are going to place this above the wait 0.15 second block that we had. So for each element in the list, in which list? In the tails list, right? So go to your variables category and drag out the tails block. So for each element in the tails list, what do we need to do? We need to store the tails, that object's position, in nx and ny, right? So click on the variables option, set variable nx to what? To this elements, to whichever element we are at currently, right? So whichever element we are working with, this element's x and y position, store that in nx and ny value variable. Okay, so set variable nx to, now go to your objects section, and here if you scroll down, you will find there is this new tail position x block, right? Let's drag this out, new tail position x. Now we can't use the new tail variable here, because we are calling this each of the elements as element, right? For each element in list tails, set variable nx to that element's position x. Okay, and set variable ny to that element's position y. Alright, so we are giving its x and y values, the tail box's x and y value, to the nx and ny variable. Okay, once we have done that, then we can set this element's position to px and py. So what we are going to do is, after this, go to your objects category again, scroll down, and this time drag out the set new tail x to one block. Okay, and place it at the bottom here. So set, not new tail, but the element with which we are working with. Okay, new tail is only the last object that in the tails list. Okay, but we are going through all the elements of my tail array. So set for each element in the list of tails. First, save that element's x and y position in the nx and ny value variables. Okay, after you have saved this element's position in the nx and ny values, then set that element's x position to what? To px and py. Remember, px and py is storing the value that they will be getting, right? So once you have saved its current x and y position to nx and ny, then set its new x, and it has to move to this position, right? It has to move to this position, and this position is what? Px and py. So set the element x to, go to your variables, drag out px, set element x to px, and set element y to py. Okay, once you have done this, now what we need to do is we need to give the nx and ny values to px and py, so that when we go to the next element, its position can be given to nx and ny, and this element can take the px and py values as its new position, and the px and py value will be basically this element's original position. Okay, I know it's slightly confusing, but once you work on it a few times, and once you see how it runs in the game, you will be able to see more clearly what's happening here. So set element x to px, set element y to py, and then what we need to do is we need to set the variable px and py to nx and ny. So what we can do is go to variables, set variable, and select px to set variable px to nx, the nx value. Okay, and similarly set variable py to ny value. Now this is going to happen for all the elements. So see, for all the elements in the tails list, first we are storing that element's position in nx and ny. Okay, and then we are telling that element to go to a new position that is stored in px and py value. Okay, and then we are transferring the nx and ny values from nx and ny to px and py, so that when we move to the new element, nx and ny can then store that new element's position, and that new element can take the value of its x and y from px and py variables. Okay, so let's try this out. I know we coded a lot of stuff here. We coded the cloning object, and then we coded the cycling of elements. So let's see if this works or not. So click on the green play button, and now let's run our code. So you see, by default, because the tail1 object that we added, the tail1 is now getting cloned multiple times, and you can see the snake's tail moving on its own. The tail's length is increasing, and the tail is constantly following the snake. Isn't that really cool? This looks amazing. I love this game. Okay, so we have coded the functionality of the tail following the snake through this loops. Now what we need to do is we need to code the game over functionality. So when the snake head object collides with any of these new tail objects, right? So we were creating this when snake collides with food, we are creating the new tail object here. Anytime snake eats the food object, a new tail object will be created. So basically what we are going to do is when any of these new tail objects are going to hits the snake head object, right? Then the game is over. So what we are going to do is, first of all, this is where, a lot of you have asked me, why do we have this enable notch option? So this is where this is going to be useful. The enable notch option is going to be useful. Let me show you. So what happens is when the game starts, the snake, so here we have this when snake collides with food, right? So when your game starts, your snake already knows that it has to run this block of code anytime it collides with food, right? But because there are no tail objects currently in the game, right? There are no tail objects in the game. So my snake does not know that it has to collide with the tail objects as well, right? So what we need to do is anytime we create a new tail object, for each of those new tail objects, we have to write the code of what happens when the new tail object will collide with the snake object. So when we are creating this new tail object, along with this, we will add the collision block inside the moment they are created. So I'll show you. So what we will do is go to our objects category and scroll down here. Scroll down completely. And you see here you have when new tail collides with. Yeah. When new tail collides with what? When new tail collides with snake. But we can't have this floating here because we need to add this collision block the moment this new tail object is created in the code, right? So what we will do is we'll click on this enable notch here, and this enable notch removes the cap from the top of this yellow block and adds this notch. So this notch makes it possible for the block to be added below this. Okay, so clone the tail1 object and name it new tail. And whenever a new tail object is created, we will be telling in our code that this new tail object's collision has to be detected with the snake head object. So snake's head object is called the snake object. So click on your snake object here and drag out this name block, the circular block. Place it here. So inside this, we define what happens when this new tail object will be colliding with the snake object, the head object. So what needs to happen is the game needs to be over. Okay. So the game over functionality now can be again coded in multiple ways. I'm going to show you the way for using Boolean variables, using the true false values of a variable. Okay. So we are going to create a variable and we are going to call it is game over. Is game over. Okay. And we are going to give it the value. So because when the game starts, the game is not over, right? So game over has to be false. So Boolean variables are like variables that only contains two values, 0 or 1, on or off. They are like a switch. Okay, a switch can be on or off. So Boolean variables, Boolean, B-O-O-L-E-A-N. Boolean variables are like a switch. They just contains two values, 0 or 1, or on or off, or true or false. Okay, all of them. Let's see. Let's go to our logic section here, and here you will see that there is a block called true, T-R-U-E. Drag this out and place it inside here. So set variable is game over to true or false. So true is on and false is off. True is 1 and false is 0. So at the beginning of the game is not over. So game over will make it false. Okay. And what we will do is the moment when new tail collides with the snake object, we will say that the is game over is true. That variable becomes true. Okay. So set variable is game over to go back to logic here and drag out the true block now. Okay, so the benefit of doing this is, now what we can do is, in our forever block, we are moving the snake, right? What we can do is, we can say at the beginning, okay, we will go to our logic section and drag out this if else statement and place it at the beginning of our forever block. And we will say that if the game is over, then don't run this forever loop, stop the forever loop completely. So the game stops. Okay, so click on the click on the logic section, drag out this if block, place it here. Now if is game over, so is game over, so if is game over is true, right? So if is game over, so if basically this variable is on, then stop the game. So to stop the game, the easiest thing we can do now is go to our loops and timers and scroll down to the very bottom. There is a block called break out of loop. So this will stop a forever loop. Okay, break out of loop. Place it inside here. So when the green play button is clicked, if the game is over, then the forever loop will stop. Otherwise, it will move the snake head object and it will move all the tail object. Okay, and it will keep on moving all of these objects in every 0.15 seconds. It's really easy. Okay, so let's see if this is working or not. So let's move the snake, and now I'm trying to play the game. See, I have the snake moving, the tail increasing, and the food moving to a new position. You can see the score is also increasing, and see, I hit the tail and snake stopped moving completely. Okay, so now what we can do is we can add some new text. Okay, we can add texts to make the game more descriptive to the player. Someone who is playing our game, we can tell them that snake has hit the tail and game is over. So what we can do is, where we are saying when new tail collides with the snake object, set variable is game over to true. Here we can also say that the scoreboard text, right? Set scoreboard text to game over. We can just do that. So set scoreboard text to game over. It doesn't need to display the score anymore. It can just say game over. So now if I reload this game, and you will see when you play the game, everything is working as expected. But now you will see game over. See, I tried to hit the tail and the game is over now. Simple, really simple. So this was the snake game. Okay, what you can do is, you will see that in the final output that I have created, I have also added instructions. So you can add instructions by simply adding 2D text objects. So you can go to the design tab here and you can click on add 3D objects, click on the text object here and add a 2D text object. You can place it at x0, y0 and z, let's say 2 for now. And you can see there is a 2D text object already here. I'm going to type instructions here. So in the value option, you can say instructions, enter, click on the green play button to start the game. Then press the up, down, left or right arrow keys. Up, down, left or right keys on the keyboard, or right keys to move the snake. Avoid hitting the tail or it's game over. Cool, this works for me. This much instruction is more than enough, and I can modify the layout of the instruction. Line height, if I can make it 60, number of font size, I can make it, let's say 8, wrap count 50. Yeah, I think this is good enough, and I can make the instructions black in color. Okay, cool. So I have the instructions, and then what I can do is I can rename this text2D object to instructions, right? And I can click on the green play button. I can go to the code window. So I have instructions right now, and what we can do is when the green play button is clicked, when the game starts, we can just set the visibility of the instructions to false. So click on your instructions object here on the left panel, scroll down and set instructions color. See this block? Place it at the top here, delete the color value, change the color to visible. So set instructions visible to, and click on logic, and this can be false. Okay, awesome. So now game over. Okay, game over. And what we can do is we can just here, actually this is more than enough. Yeah, this is fine. So to restart the game, they'll have to reload the screen. So your player will have to reload the screen. What I was going to suggest is when the game is over, you can display the instructions panel again and tell them that you have to reload the screen, reload the game to replay the game. Okay, so that you can do on your own as well. So here now see, when I click on the green play button, the instructions disappear, and now I can move my snake. Okay, cool. So this was the snake game. All right, hope you guys like this. Try to build this, and what all of you can try to do now, once you build this part by yourself, you guys can try adding walls, add more boxes, and add some walls or some form of obstacles in the arena where the snake moves, and then make it so that snake doesn't just have to avoid hitting its own tail, but snake also has to avoid hitting the walls, otherwise the game is also over. Okay, so you can have that functionality coded as well. So try to do that and publish your games, publish your projects, and share it in the comments, and I would love to see what you guys are building as well. Okay, cool. So next week we will be back with another new tutorial, and hope you guys like this session. Hope you guys build more games, share your games with me. Okay, cool. Bye bye.